There was a big amount of news today from the Supreme Court of the United States. There was some good, there was some bad, and some ugly. And we're going to get into some of that right here. So first of all, the good. There was a major case, Trump versus Slaughter. Now, this involves something that you've never really cared about, maybe you've never even wanted to hear, called Humphrey's Executor. Essentially, Humphrey's Executor was this magical provision that's been in precedent for a very long time that said the President of the United States and the executive agencies, the USDA, the FBI, the CIA, the FCC, the IRS, the 3-letter and 4-letter agencies that we all know and hate, right? The president can hire people to work for them because they're executive agencies. They are under the executive branch of government. He can hire people, but he can't fire people from them if they're not explicitly political appointees. Meaning this, let's say that the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, let's say, which is under the Department of Commerce because of that used to be under trade. So the NOAA, they hire me as a young meteorological scientist and a climatologist, and I go to work for the NOAA, and let's say around the second Trump administration that I've been working there for 10, 15, 20 years, start noticing that, man, some of the climate data doesn't look so climate changey. And then I just go ahead and tell up the chain all the way up to Howard Lutnick, well, I'm not going to release the data because I don't like that it just so happens to suggest that maybe this one problem we thought there was with climate change in the Atlantic Ocean is disappearing. Now, am I making up this example? Nope. There is an individual inside the NOAA who refused to release any climatology information out of the Atlantic Ocean and out of the Caribbean and the Gulf of America because it wasn't suggesting the end is here. And under the Humphrey's Executor, like the Humphrey's Executor precedent, you couldn't fire me because why? Well, I wasn't a political appointee. I was hired. I went through ZipRecruiter or whatever, and some HR department stuck me there. And so now I can just be there forever. It was a major, major win today, of course, along the ideological 6-3 lines. Roberts joined by Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett in full. Thomas joined in every part except one. Gorsuch also wrote a little something. The dissent was written by Sotomayor, and it is, it's bonkers. We're going to get into it here at Radio Crew. We're going to see you guys on the other side of your commercial break. It's the Tony Kinnett here on the Daily Signal. So, stepping back in time, Trump fired the Federal Trade Commission Commissioner, Rebecca Slaughter, a Democrat, without cause in March of 2025. Said, you're gone, you're fired, catch another episode of The Apprentice later. And so Rebecca Slaughter sued, citing the 1935 Humphrey's Executor precedent, which held that Congress could magically protect multi-member independent agency officials from at-will removal. Which just means this, if Congress has given a certain amount of money to the Department of Education, and then they hire some teacher who's awful, or some administrator who's awful, then the Trump administration can't just fire them for being awful. Just saying, I don't like, you're clearly politicizing your position, you're not doing a number of things that are the priority of the administration, maybe you're doing malicious compliance, whatever. And so instead of the executive, the chief executive, being allowed to fire people in the executive, the Franklin Delano Roosevelt from hell precedent said the president can't do it. So Roberts wrote, quote, if anything more is left of Humphreys, we overrule it. That is perhaps the most useful thing Chief Justice John Roberts has ever actually wrote in the United States Supreme Court in any decision. Anything more that's left of Humphreys, we overrule it. Humphreys has for decades been a result in search of a rationale. That phrase is going to come back to haunt, the media airwaves here in just a little bit. He says, neither Congress nor the courts may saddle the president with those with whom he cannot work. You can't hire someone and be like, well, for DEI reasons, Mr. President, you're stuck with this absolutely insufferable individual forever. That's not a thing. Now, in the same day, what's kind of funny is that Trump versus Cook, Roberts wrote with a 5-4 majority that the Trump administration couldn't remove Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook while litigation continues. So he suggested that the Federal Reserve occupies a totally constitutionally distinct historical position, meaning the Federal Reserve is like way different, the first and second banks of the United States. The problem is it doesn't work like that. That may be really nice, and we all may pretend after listening to the Alexander Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda soundtrack that, oh, well, I mean, it's very, very, very important that we, sit here and giggle over all of this nonsense because the Federal Reserve is super duper separate. No, it's not. In the law, the Federal Reserve is not separate and distinct in any way, shape, or form than any other branch of the administrative state. It's just not. According to the law, according to the precedent until today. Now, Sonia Sotomayor got really, really angry that the president could fire unelected members of the executive and suggested that this is a power unknown even to the English crown against which the founders revolted. If you would have told George Washington, the first president of the United States, John Adams, the second president, Thomas Jefferson, the third, that there were special executive agency individuals that they could not fire and Congress really could not remove, they just got to be there forever, they probably would have hanged you like George Washington hanged traitors in New York City. That's ridiculous. And by the way, what evidence do I have of this? All the way back through the Abe Lincoln administration, some of the only foreign policy documents that we have that aren't Civil War related is how much scorn the United States had in the pre-Civil War era, in the Civil War era, and in the Reconstruction era for Prussia's administrative state. Essentially, it's Germany and the Prussians that Woodrow Wilson would be so later enamored with in the early 1900s, just creating a bunch of technocrats where I have a doctorate next to my name, therefore I'm always right, which is retarded. And that's not how that works. But alas, I digress.